On your Friday episode of Locked On Raptors, we spent plenty of time talking about the Raptors' surprising offense this season, but just as surprising is that the Raptors are the third best defense in the NBA. How have they done it? We'll get to the bottom of it today on the show with Joe Wolfond.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Friday, November the 28th, and I am your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 12 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on Blue Sky. You can find the show on Instagram. You can join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. Link in the description of the podcast. 100% free to join. Great place. Come talk ball amongst friends. We'd love to see you there. And it's free to join. As always, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. You can go check out FanDuel right now. And new customers, if you bet $5, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. And we will get started here on an episode where we are going to deep dive hard into what the hell is going on with the Toronto Raptors defense. They're very good at it, if you are not aware. They are, per Clean the Glass, the third-ranked defense in the NBA. And since the first 5 games of the season, where they were 29th in defense, over the past 14, they have the number 2 defense, and they are about as close to the Oklahoma City Thunder in that time as they are to the third best defensive team in the league. Yeah, they've been that good, and here to dig into why they've been that good, what's working, what could still be fine-tuned, it is, of course, our Friday bi-weekly guest. It's Joe Wolfond. How are you, pal?
I'm good. Great to be here. Great to be talking about a subject very close to my heart. Couldn't be more excited.
Yeah, I think the mood is pretty high, as I think we both spent most of the morning just watching the Raptors play defense, which is apparently a pretty awesome thing to do. Lots of places we're going to go today. I think we're going to get into the sort of adjustments the team has made over the course of the season since their rough start. We'll get into some individual defensive performances and all of that. But let me just ask you sort of flat out. They are, again, the number 3 defense in the NBA right now per Clean the Glass. They've been on a really great heater of late. What's working? Why are the Raptors so good at defense, Joe? If you can summarize into one sort of grand arching takeaway here, and we'll get into the nuts and bolts and the nitty gritty as we go throughout the show.
I think they're playing with a lot of connectivity right now, which is something that was glaringly absent from that really unsightly 1-4 start. And especially, I mean, they have scaled back some of the super high intensity pressure, but they're still doing a lot of that. It's just that when they're kind of rotating, scrambling behind that pressure, they've been way more in sync. The rotations are on a string. Guys are, kind of experiencing something of a mind meld in terms of like the way that they're rotating. And it's like, There are still mistakes within that, as there are bound to be, but you're just seeing way less of like 2 guys rotating to the same shooter, right? Somebody blowing an assignment. Everybody's sort of where they're supposed to be. And I think it's just been more of like there's been a little bit more thought put into how they're executing certain concepts, where it's like, okay, they are still going to full court press some of the time, but it's basically only going to be like Jamal Shed or Jacoby Walter who's providing, 90 feet of pressure. They're still doing the blind double team thing some of the time, but again, it's kind of just like Jacoby who has license to do that. I mean, that's not entirely true, but right. I kind of think it should be. He's clearly the guy who's the best on the team at doing that. And, like IQ is still kind of freelancing in that capacity sometimes. Not as good at Jacoby at executing that. But like, I just think they've figured out, okay, if you want to do X, Y, and Z, here's the personnel that you can use to do that, as opposed to it being sort of a team-wide concept. And that was sort of something we talked about before the season when we were going through how we thought they were going to defend. And I remember talking about like, okay, so Darko is preaching all of this like intense ball pressure, high pickup points, things like that. And I'm like, when certain bench guys come into the game, I think that's something they can execute, but maybe not when the starters are on the floor. So I think we've seen a shift in that capacity, just in terms of recognizing who can execute what and which sort of schemes make sense with which guys on the floor. And I think, to boil it down to its most simple, I guess, explanation, it really is that certain guys who were struggling to defend early in the season are just defending way better now. Ingram and Immanuel Quickley, I would say, first and foremost, those guys have just been flat out way better at playing defense. And so I think it's a lot of different things that are working. Obviously, Scottie Barnes is still kind of the guy holding it all together, but there was something specifically that I wanted to look up that I've noticed a kind of a significant shift with, just in terms of what they're not even what they're asking him to do, but what he is sort of having to do in terms of cleaning up messes on the backside.
Yeah.
So I think the last time we did one of these was after the win over the Cavs. We were talking about that as the most satisfying Raptors game in 3 years, and they haven't lost since then. So it just kind of keeps getting better and better. And I remember in that game saying, yes, they had won in pretty convincing fashion, but I didn't think that had actually been a particularly good defensive game for them. There were actually kind of a lot of blown assignments in that game, miscommunications on switches, things like that. And they had sort of gotten lucky that the Cavs had shot 10 for 40 from 3 on a lot of open looks. Since then, I think the process has really tightened up, where I actually don't... I mean, look, the 3-point defense is still going to normalize to some extent. Opponents shooting 32% from deep against them, that's just not going to stay at that level for the whole season. But I think the process and the results have actually lined up in the 7 games since. So one thing that I wanted to look at was how many shots per game is Scottie Barnes challenging at the rim before and after that point. And before that point, it was 5.4 per game, and since then it's 3.4 per game. So that's just one sort of tiny snapshot of the way that they have lessened his kind of workload and made it not so onerous for him to have to kind of do everything, put out fires on the backside. So I think all of that is sort of playing into everything that's going right for them at that end of the floor.
Yeah, I think that's all really well put. And the connectivity thing, I think, is a big deal. I think, too, a word I would use is selectiveness in terms of how they've decided to deploy certain coverages and certain guys. And I think you kind of hit on that a little bit with who they're using in certain situations, like the press stuff. And I'd also say unpredictability is a thing they've kind of thrown in a little bit too. And I think, that's something we've talked a lot about with the offense, where, kind of any trip down the floor can be something different, someone different who's kind of making it hell for someone to try to stop their half court offense. But I think it's kind of applying on the defensive end too. I actually went back and watched the Pacers game. And specifically the pick and roll defense from that game, and sort of, the pick and roll defense from the last little while, which has been airtight as it turns out. But in that game, the first 3 pick and rolls the Pacers ran, I think it was pretty emblematic of what they're doing in terms of switching things up. The first one, Pirtle hedges high and recovers back. The second one, it's more of just a classic straight drop. And the third one, I had it written down here. What was the third one? There was just a straight switch. They switched Pirtle on an Emhart, right? I think they're not getting bound to one coverage. And I know this is a thing Darko's talked about in the past when I've asked him about the sort of defensive identity he wants for the team. And he's just said, you can't do the same thing all the time. You got to keep, offenses guessing. And I think that is really coming through with how they're playing here. And you couple that with, the uptick from Ingram, I think, as a rim protector, help defender, rotator, right? He has been so great in these behind the defense rotations. I mean, we saw that possession against the Cavs this week, which I think you might have posted about being the defensive possession of the season late in the game. I talked about it at length on the show after that game too, where you have Ingram and Quickley and Shed just completely walling off Donovan Mitchell and the dribble handoff that tried to happen before that. And then you end up Ingram with this beautiful rotation out to Lonzo Ball in the wing. That ends up with the entry pass that gets stolen by Scottie Barnes. And I think that's just really indicative of, Ingram. I mean, of all the guys too, to be really good in rotation and contesting shots, the guy with the arms that are that long, pretty big deal to have him really just kind of flying around and making things trouble. I also think too, going to the selectiveness thing, I think, you mentioned the 3-point defense, and surely teams are not going to shoot 32% all the time, but there's always this sort of question we come up with when teams are really having a lot of success stopping other teams from hitting threes. The 2019-20 team, I think, is the clear example of this, right? The one that I think Mike Prada wrote about, they make shooters see ghosts. That was like the whole thing. They were the team of 1,000 defensive think pieces. And I think there's been a little bit of, not to say that they're doing that this year. I don't think they're going to keep up this 32% allowed from three, but you can see they're being selective about who they're contesting shots on, who they're just let it rip, where they're funneling their shots to. In that game against the Cavs and in the Pacers game too, like you can see like the math symbols floating above guys' heads as they calculate whether, I'm going to go and contest this TJ McConnell three. No, I'm not. It's TJ McConnell. I'm just going to let him shoot. Or, Ben Mathurin has it. I'm going to go contest that because he's been red hot. Like I think they are pretty schooled going into games of who they want to let shoot and who they're fine to sort of take those open looks. And I think you're seeing that blend in a little bit too, where they're being a little bit more conservative. They're laying back on the aggression. They're in better position. Their rebounding is getting better. They're up to 11th in defensive rebounding. Like it's all this sort of thing that's feeding into, this sort of feedback loop of positivity on defense. And I think a lot of that is them just being a little smarter, a little more sort of methodical about when they choose to, ramp up the pressure and things like that. I have a fun stat for your ass, Joe. We'll come back on the other side and get into that regarding the pressure defense, and we'll talk about that and some other stuff that's really working for the Raptors so far coming up in just one sec. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at DoorDash, and right now the NBA season's heating up. As you know, it's NBA Cup night, and DoorDash has found the perfect way to keep fans in their bag all season long. Whether you're watching for the highlights of your fantasy team or you're just a favorite player, DoorDash makes every game night even better. And right now, they're doing something called the Bag Drop and celebrating the NBA season and big-time performances. Every single time an NBA player drops 50 points in a game, DoorDash drops 50% off your order with Dash Pass the next day, and you're automatically entered for a chance to win the ultimate fan bag. We're talking player-inspired drip, exclusive gear, stuff you're actually going to want. That's pretty sweet. DoorDash has you covered for late-night highlights, last-minute parties, and double OT fuel ups. So right now, you can go over to DoorDash. Next time someone goes off for 50 in a game, which happens all the time in the modern NBA, you can use promo code NBA50 the next day for 50% off on DoorDash with DoorDash with Dash Pass, plus your shot at the bag drop. Dash Pass members only. 50% off 10 days the day after a 50-point game with promo code. Terms apply. No purchase necessary. Ends April 13th. Open to U.S. residents 21 or older. Visit DoorDashinYourBag.com for full details. DoorDash in your bag all season long. Back at it here with Joe Wolfond, getting to the bottom of why the Raptors are so good at getting them stops. I mentioned I had a fun stat for you from kind of going through my preparation for this show, Joe. You ready for it?
Hit me.
Okay, so to the point of the full court pressure and be a little more selective with it. The Raptors have, per synergy, 154 possessions that have been logged as like pressure possessions, like full court press possessions. 82 of those came in the first 5 games of the year. So more than half. They have been just like way more selective about when they do it, to your point you made earlier. I think that obviously has led to the defensive structure being a little bit tighter. They're kind of laying back and just kind of letting their length and activity and rotation speak for themselves. Does that surprise you? I mean, probably not, given what we've watched. Like we watched the games a lot, but it seemed like a little high to me that like over 50% of their pressure possessions came in the first 5 games of the season. But, and that's not to say it's the only reason why they're defending well now. There are a lot of things, and we'll continue to get into them, but that seems pretty telling.
Yeah, no, it doesn't really surprise me just having watched the games and seen the way that they've scaled it back. And it speaks to something. I mean, we kind of hit on this on our last episode also, where we were talking a bit about how they've de-emphasized offensive rebounding a little bit, in spite of that being something that the entire league is basically going gaga over right now. And they've sort of done that in service of prioritizing transition defense, which they've been one of the best transition defensive teams in the league. Mm-hmm. And to me, that spoke to Darko's adaptability and something that I've tried to hit on when I've talked about him in the past, of just, I may not agree with every schematic decision, every substitution pattern. I may not agree with everything that he does, but one thing that has always impressed me about Darko, among many things, is just his willingness to adapt. Like he, in a league full of fairly stubborn coaches, is not at all stubborn, right? Like he will try stuff, and he clearly has some very like strongly held views about how he thinks basketball should be played and what constitutes winning basketball, but nothing that he is holding too tightly to that he isn't willing to loosen his grip a little bit in service of getting the most out of the team that he is actually coaching. And so I think, as frustrating as it was to watch the team flounder trying to execute this very high pressure scheme early in the season, I think it's been equally heartening to see the adjustments that have been made and how those are all working to get the most out of this group. And so, again, to go back to some of the process stuff that I feel like I hit on last time, where I'm like, some of the defensive numbers look good, but I think they're maybe playing over their heads at that end of the floor. Like I was talking about, they were fouling a ton, they were giving up a ton of offensive rebounds, and they were giving up a ton of shots at the rim. So again, in like the 7 games since we last did this, I wanted to see how much all of those things have changed. And since then, they've been the second best defensive rebounding team in the league. Before that, they were 19th.
Crazy.
Since then, they've given up, they're like directly middle of the pack, 14th in the number of shots they've given up at the rim. Before that, they were 28th. And then foul rate, they're up to 18th since then, which okay, they're still fouling a fair bit. Before that, they were 20.
Everyone's fouling in today's NBA, man.
That's correct. And before that, they were 27th. So I think in terms of all the things we're talking about, the sort of schematic tweaks that they've made, I think we're seeing the impacts of that. And again, that's just going along with better execution, like straight up better defensive play from everyone on the roster. And like the possession that you highlighted against the Cavs, the reason that I was like, that's my favorite defensive possession of the year, was because it required all 5 guys on the floor to do their jobs to a T. And that started with, Jamal Shead just pestering Donovan Mitchell with the ball, Immanuel Quickley doing incredible ball denial work on Lonzo so that they couldn't execute the dribble handoff that they wanted to. So then Mitchell basically has to try and take Jamal Shead off the dribble, and as soon as he tries to go to his spin move, Quickley is there in his lap, and the ball gets spat out to Lonzo. Immediately, Ingram is there with the rotation. And then on the backside, it's Yak and Scottie trying to zone up 3 guys. And if you watch that play, again, the synchronicity with which they both rotate, and Yak goes to the corner man that Ingram had just rotated off of, and then Scottie goes to the dunker spot guy. I think it was Mobley that Pirtle had just rotated off of. But Lonzo, who's a very, very smart connective passer, right? Like as good as anybody in the league at identifying where that next pass can go and how you can sort of wrong foot a defense in rotation, thinks that he has the pass to the dunker spot, and Scottie is right there to intercept it. That was like a, kind of like the platonic ideal of what we're talking about, and it's not going to look like that on every possession. But I think that really does go to show just how everyone is understanding their roles and executing them really well right now.
Yeah. Another area I think has been interesting because I've seen some folks, and I felt this myself, talk about, I think you said it on the show that you think maybe they're conceding switches a little bit too easily on the defensive end sometimes. And, it's sort of, you'd rather see them kind of avoid certain mismatches that they're kind of putting themselves into. But I actually think going back and watching, I've actually quite liked their switch defense when they've busted it out. And I think, this is an example of, sort of guys maybe punching above their weight. Maybe that's not the right word. Maybe they've just gotten better at defense. But I think of like Mamu, for example, where he's been coming in off the bench. The numbers with him on the floor defensively are ridiculous. And he's not exactly a guy who strikes you as, wow, good defender, anchor of good defense when he's on the floor. A lot of it is he's playing with Scottie a lot, and that's helping matters quite a bit. But I do think you're seeing most of these guys hold up pretty well when they're asked to switch. And a lot of it is just like very kind of quick fire decision-making switch-wise. It's like a lot of like peel switching and stuff like that, where it's just like, oh, all of a sudden I've got to pick up this guy. He's picking up has gone and rotated back and like made the beautiful sort of easy decision. And like, it's not easy to make those decisions on the fly in a snap like that. But I think they've really gotten that down quite a bit to the point where I'm like, I'm totally fine when they switch most of the time. I mentioned earlier they had, Pirtle switch on a Nemhard a couple times in the last game, and that's been totally fine. I think he, since his back got right, has been pretty mobile, and you're able to kind of do a lot of things with him defensively. What have you made of the switch defense? Because I think it's been an interesting wrinkle that I think has only gotten better as the season's gone along, as some guys have kind of leveled up.
Yeah, I mean, when I was talking about that, there were kind of like a few specific instances when I was like, it got into like a little bit of over switching, and it was leading to breakdowns because certain guys thought they were switching and other guys didn't, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was more just like, I think a lot of it was with Pirtle, where I'm like I just didn't love seeing him come all the way out to the perimeter as often as he was. And I think, in a game against a team like the Pacers, it's just not going to burn you as badly. Like, that's a really poor offensive team. But something like peel switching, that's a completely different story, right? Like, that has to be part of the Raptors scheme because they want to pressure ball handlers and because they frankly give up a lot of dribble penetration. And so I've said this a few times before, but to me, like, maybe the most important thing that a guard defender can do in this day and age is make the right decision, stay active, stay in the play after getting beat off the dribble. Because even the best on-ball guard defenders in the league are going to get beat off the dribble a ton. Like that,
a lot of really good guards.
Such is the level of offensive skill in the game today. So it's really all about what are you doing after that. And whether that's like continuing to pursue the ball handler and stay in contact, a lot of times it is making that peel switch, right? When somebody is coming over to help you, it's like immediate identification of where you need to be to make sure that that window closes as quickly as possible. And so for the Raptors, if they want to sit on a ball handler's shoulder and not let them get to their strong hand, or just sort of like try and pressure them and like accepting that maybe they're going to get beat off the bounce as a consequence of that, really, like, the next thing they do has to be to engage and whether, again, like, it could be just active pursuit of the ball and applying rear view pressure, but a lot of times really it is making that peel switch. So I'm totally fine with that, and I agree. I think they've been executing that well. And then again, when it's like there are certain situations, like late clock situations, where I'm totally fine with the switch, right? And there will be instances where they switch themselves into a bad matchup, but they have the help layered behind it. And so they don't get burned on that switch as badly as you might think, just given the matchup. I'm not like opposed to switching. I just think that is one thing that's led to some of the miscommunications that we've seen. Like, and that's still happening. Like, even in that Cavs game where I thought they defended exceptionally well, I think there were like 4 or 5 different times when the Cavs ran Spain pick and roll and the Raptors just flubbed their coverage of it. Like, just didn't know how they wanted to defend it. So it's like there's still kinks to iron out, but generally, yeah, I think aspects of switching are still super important, and those are things that I think they're executing better now than they were a couple of weeks ago.
We'll come back to the side here, Joe. Finish off our talk about your just unbelievably good at defense Toronto Raptors and get into some stuff that, maybe cause for concern. Stuff that they could maybe tighten up. Also, like, are they ever going to play any good offenses and give us a real test here? We'll get into that coming up in just 1 second to close things out. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get into the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It's all very fun if you're into this kind of thing. And, of course, it's not just individual games. You can go and look at futures bets. Where will Kyle Tucker sign in MLB free agency? The Toronto Blue Jays, of course. Where will Bo Bichette sign in free agency? The Toronto Blue Jays, of course. Yeah, they're just getting everybody, baby. Give me Framber Valdez, too. Actually, maybe not. They got Dylan Cease. They're all set in the rotation. But if you think all these free agent moves by your Blue Jays mean they're going to go win the World Series next year, you can put money on them to win the World Series, too, or any other team you think is going to go do the thing in baseball next summer. It's all there for you to go peruse right now at FanDuel. They're giving new customers $300 in bonus bets for your first $5 bet that wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Back at it here with Joe Wolfond as we continue to talk about the Toronto Raptors defending their bags off. Joe, they've defended extremely well of late. They've also played not a lot of very good teams of late. So I have I guess it's a stat. It's not really a stat. It's just a thing that's happened. The Toronto Raptors have played one game against the top 10 offense per clean the glass. Exactly one. It was the game against the Houston Rockets back on whatever the hell day it was, early in the season, still in October. In games where they play against teams with top 10 offenses, they are ranked 30th in defense because they got bludgeoned in that game by Steven Adams and Alperen Sengun and the bazillion offensive rebounds they gave up. Such is life against the Houston Rockets. Some good tests coming up this week. You get the New York Knicks on Sunday on the second night of a back-to-back. That'll be tough, but that's a really good offensive team, a good test for what the Raptors are doing. And then they, of course, have the Lakers next week with Doncic and Reeves and LeBron and their top 10 offense as well. So some good offenses on the horizon here. Is there anything that gives you pause about this defense against better offenses, or to the process conversation we've had? Like, do you think they're doing the right things even against lesser offenses that can sort of translate into these games against better teams with a little more firepower?
No, I mean, like, there are things that sort of still give me pause personnel-wise. Like, yeah. And I think it's really going up against teams that just have a lot of ball handling and perimeter talent that are going to pose challenges. But I'd say it's gotten to a point where, from a process perspective, there's nothing really that I would point to and say there's something that they need to start doing differently if they want to have better success against these better offensive teams. Like, I think they're doing all the right things, and it's just a question of continuing to execute at this level and just being as locked in as they can possibly be. And, like, expecting that, yeah, the three-point defense is probably going to regress to a certain extent. And I know, like, maybe it is kind of like you focus a little bit more on taking away the middle of the floor and not allowing so much dribble penetration. Because, again, a better offensive team is maybe just going to make you pay a little bit more with whether it is like the drives themselves or what the drives lead to in terms of kicking the ball out and getting it swinging around. Maybe moving the ball faster than you can rotate in a way that hadn't been the case for a shorthanded Cavs team or a limited offensive Pacers team. But, I don't think that they're doing anything that I would point to and say, well, this is the thing that is going to lead to them getting picked apart by a good offense. It's just, like, I think, thinking back to that Houston game that you mentioned, it's like they just got absolutely mauled on the offensive glass in that game. And I think to the point that we were making before, it's like some of the adjustments that they've made have led to them improving as a defensive rebounding team. But sometimes you just go up against a team like the Rockets that is built to absolutely demolish teams on the offensive glass, and there's not a ton that you can do about it. Like, you're just going to get mauled by Steven Adams because Steven Adams does that.
And there was no Pirtle in that game either, by the way. So
correct, yes. And honestly, dude, I mean, of all the things that we've talked about, him just looking like Jakob Pirtle again, like moving better, actually being able to get off the ground a little bit, unbelievable block in crunch time last night, or a couple nights ago, sorry, like, that's been absolutely massive in terms of just solidifying their defense, giving them like an actual anchor where it's not just on Scottie. I mean, I should have mentioned that too, as far as like the way that his responsibilities as a backline anchor have scaled down a bit. Yeah. Yak being Yak is a huge part of that. So
no doubt.
So that's all great. Another play I wanted to point out, just to give Scottie some more of his flowers.
Please do.
How many times have you seen a guy stand in to take a charge, like go into the statue pose, get stepped around, and then turn around and get a rear view block on the guy who just drove past you? Like, I can't think of a time that I've actually ever seen that happen before.
I'm sure Wemby's done it at some point just because his arms are
by a human. Sorry. Yeah. By an actual human person.
Yeah.
Scottie did that to Benedict Mathurin in that Pacers game, and my jaw hit the floor. That was crazy. He's so good. He is so good.
It's been so fun to watch him just kind of find this like final defensive form after, I mean, he's really good last year too. He took a real leap, and I think it was kind of a slept-on story because the team stunk. But now being emboldened to just kind of throw so much more of his energy into that, not having to create everything on the offensive end, it's just it's all working in beautiful harmony. This basketball team, some of its parts, et cetera, et cetera. It's very, very cool. Curious your thoughts on the Jacoby Walter, RJ Barrett sort of flip flop, because obviously the offense has been a lot worse with RJ out and Jacoby filling in that spot. I know Murray Boyle started the game on Wednesday, but he only played 3 minutes, got foul trouble. And then Walter kind of ran with that spot with the starters for the rest of the game after starting the game before that as well. I think we are both in agreement that Jacoby Walter is one of the better defenders on the team. I think his defensive footwork is fantastic. I think he can kind of hang with basically any guard you want, and he's a lot of fun doing it. Obviously doesn't have the offensive punch attacking the second side that RJ does. And so, it's the trade-off that you'd expect, but curious your thoughts on Walter's defensive sort of contributions and, RJ as well. I mean, RJ's still not what you'd call a good defender. I do think he's shown a little more resistance on the ball this year than maybe years past, but curious in that sort of flip-flop for you, having Walter in as opposed to RJ, and sort of, do you think they'll be able to the last two games have been their two best defensive games of the season by a lot of measures. Can they reach those heights with Barrett taking those minutes away from Walter once he's eventually back?
Probably not, but that's okay. Like, that's part of the trade-off that you make. And like you said, the defense has been way better with Jacoby basically he hasn't taken all of RJ's minutes, but he's taken a big chunk of them. And the offense has been way worse. And I think they still really, really need what RJ provides on offense. I think you've really seen the offense get sticky in a way that it wasn't in the first few weeks of the season. And I think it's really because you're missing that downhill component, the cutting component. Like, they still have guys who are trying to do those things, sometimes doing those things successfully, but nobody who does them at the level that RJ does. And as much as RJ isn't always the best decision maker in transition, isn't always the best finisher, I think we've seen also their transition game has not been nearly as effective with him out of the lineup. So I would just say, the defense is probably going to be worse when he comes back, and that's a totally fine trade-off to make, because I think you've seen that the defense with him can still be pretty good and the offense can be exceptional. And I think you would just take the silver lining that Jacoby has found it, right? He looked totally lost at the start of the season, and now his three ball has really come back around, and he is proving himself as, I think, easily the best perimeter defender on the team. To me, that's no contest right now. So him just establishing himself as a fixture in the rotation is a great thing. And for him to be, part of some of those mixed lineups that are going to be more aggressive defensively, force turnovers, run out in transition, that's huge. So, I think, again, to your point, I think it's all about effort with RJ, and it's also about, I've said this before, I think he has certain limitations in terms of his kind of lateral explosiveness to prevent him from being a really, really good on-ball defender. I just don't think that's ever going to be in the cards for him. But the thing that he could control more so was just team defense, right? Just being in the right spots, not blowing rotations, not getting back cut, things like that. And stuff like that just kind of comes down to focus and effort. And I think we've seen more of that from him this year, and that's really all you can ask for.
Yeah, I'm not getting the sense that Darko is going to stand for a whole lot of watching dudes back cut you this season, now that they're serious and now that there are a lot of guys kind of vying for minutes, right? I don't think he's going to be afraid to make lineup changes and sort of in-game, decisions on who's playing down the stretch and whatnot, based on what he's seeing defensively. I think, he's pressing the right buttons, man. And I think he's going to continue to do that. And I think that's going to sort of force everyone to kind of bring it a little bit. Last one for you. I asked you this question before the season. We talked about it at length, but I think it's a little bit of a more interesting one now because of what we've seen on the floor. Raptors are 6th in offense, 3rd in defense. Where will they finish higher, offense or defense, by season's end?
I'm still saying offense. As much as I have come around in the last couple of weeks to feeling like the defense can be better than I thought it would be, I would say from what I've seen, taking this whole season to this point, I have more faith in the offensive results kind of sustaining themselves than the defensive results. But I would say the ceiling on both ends of the floor has proven itself to be higher than I would have expected coming into the season, right? Like,
yeah,
I think the offense can reach a higher level than I would have thought coming into the year, and I would say the same thing about the defense, and that's just, again, I'm excited for the competition to ramp up and to see how they fare when they hit a run of really good teams, which is still not going to happen for a little bit. But from what we've seen so far, I mean, it's hard not to just be over the moon. But I would say offense that's the short answer, I guess.
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. There's like a little bit less, I think, in terms of stuff you could look at that could have the bottom fall out of it. Specifically the 3-point defense and the accuracy of other teams. But yeah, I mean, if you told me before the season they could finish top 10 on both ends, I would have said, "You're insane, you lunatic. Go get help." And now, I would not be shocked at all if they finished top 10 on both ends, based on what we've seen so far. It's been quite a treat to watch. Quite a treat to talk to you as well, my friend. Anything you want to promote for the good people out there before we wrap this thing up?
I wrote a piece a few days ago at Raptors Republic, and it was just sort of talking about kind of league trends as a whole and the way that, championship winning or championship contending teams can sort of shape those tendencies around the league. Sometimes for better and sometimes, in specific teams' cases for worse, when they're maybe just jumping on a trend without accounting for whether that's going to work for their specific personnel group. And I felt that way about the Raptors and their kind of full court pressing early in the season. And so it's just sort of like an exploration of that and how the Raptors fit into this new league landscape that has sort of changed in light of, how the Pacers and Thunder played last year compared to, say, how the Celtics had won the championship the year before. And it's really just almost like a celebration of variety and the fact that there are so many different ways to succeed. And that's the kind of stuff that really fascinates me. And so I wanted to delve into that, from a league-wide lens and also from a Raptors lens. So that's like the piece that I wrote most recently. I'm hoping to get back into writing a little bit more often. But I did a pod with Samson at Raptors Republic to sort of talk through all that stuff as well. Was on with Will and Alex a few days ago. So all that stuff is stuff you can check out if you're interested in hearing more of my thoughts about the Raptors and the league at large.
Hell yeah. We love Wolfond words, especially big picture Wolfond words. I do have to bleep out the part about Samson and Will's podcast getting an appearance, unfortunately.
Oh, my apologies.
We can't have that competition going on here.
Okay.
Nasty stuff. No,
my bad.
We like them. They're fine. We will leave it there. Thanks so much, man, for coming on the show. Thanks to you, the listeners, for rocking with the show. We'll be back again on Monday after a weekend of 2 basketball games against the Hornets and the Knicks. We'll talk about that. It'll be a nice week as we look ahead to the NBA Cup quarterfinals the following week as well. It's really exciting talking about a good team. I just can't get over it. So, yeah, we'll have plenty of stuff for you next week as we delve in. They got the Blazers next week, the Lakers next week. It's going to be a loaded one. Thanks so much for hanging. Talk to you soon. Bye. Maybe I shouldn't shoot a hockey puck.